Okay, so here we're supposed to kind of interpret what's being said. So it says the revenue from the sales of X units of a commodity is RX Canadian dollars and UR US dollars and is the equivalent of R Canadian dollars. Okay. So on September 8th, 2009, one Canadian dollar was worth 1.0764 US dollars. And the rate of change, so that's a key thing here, rate of change of the US dollar value was 0.925 US per Canadian dollar. So on the same day, sales were 476 units. So this was going to be X. Okay, so that's X. Producing revenue of 10,000 Canadian, and revenue was increasing. Okay, so we had some increasing value. So that's going to be another rate by 2.6 Canadian per unit. Now evaluate each of the following expressions and write a sentence interpreting each value. All right, so R of X. Well, we said that on that day, X was 476. And so what we want to do is we want to say R, well, we'll say X is equal to 476. And then we'll say R of 476 is equal to, and it said it was equal to, where did it go up here? Here it is, 10,000 Canadian. And so that's equal to 10,000 Canadian. Too many letters. Canadian. Okay. And so the R476 is $10,000 Canadian. And so we could say on September 8th, 2009, the revenue from the sale of 476 units, because that's how many units we did, uh, was, because it's in past, 10,000 Canadian. Okay. And dollars is there. So that would be a good interpretation of what we have here based on what was given. So we had to pull out that X units because that's, said we're going to sell that many X units and we sold that many. So we had to plug that in for our X for the function R. And then we said that was the revenue, 10,000 Canadian. Now, U is going to be US dollars. That's going to be equivalent to how many Canadian dollars there were. Okay. So what we've done is we're going to have R is the revenue in Canadian, and we need to convert that to US dollars. So here, R we just said was $10,000 Canadian, and so we know that U of 10,000 is going to be equal to, well, we have that conversion rate. $1.0764 is going to be 1 Canadian dollar. So we're going to take 1.0764 US per 1 Canadian, and those are both dollars, times how many Canadian dollars did we had? We had 10,000 Canadian dollars. So if we multiply that, that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and that will give us the correct value. So it should give us 10,764 US dollars. Okay. So all we did was this conversion factor from US dollars per 1 Canadian dollar, and that was in Canadian. And so then we did that conversion, those canceled, and we're left with US dollars. And so what we can say then is on September 8th, 2009, the revenue of 10,000 Canadian dollars was worth, and then we was worth the 10,764 US. Okay. And so that would be what we would do there. Now, the next page, you're going to start asking for the derivatives. And so those are going to be the rates of change. And so we have a couple rates of change. We have the rate of change of the US dollar is 0.925 US per Canadian dollar. And we also have the revenue is increasing by 2.6 Canadian per unit. Okay, so we have two rates. And so we just have to know which rate is which. So DR dx or du dr. Okay, so DRDX. So that's going to be our first one. And so this was based on the 476 units. So what we will do is we're going to say, well, we're going to take the DRDX at x equals 476. Okay, and that said it was increasing by 2.6 Canadian per unit. Okay, so that's going to be equal to 2.6 Canadian per unit. Okay, and so that would be what we're looking at because we had to plug in that for x, DRDX with x equals 476 gives us a revenue changing by 2.6 Canadian dollars per unit. So how would we write that? I would say, on September 8th, 2009, and again, we put that all every time. Now the revenue was, now it was positive, so it was increasing by, and it was $2.6 Canadian per unit. Okay. And so that's what we know. And it was increasing by that because that was what was given to us in our problem. Now DUDR, well, okay, now that was when we plugged in the 10,000 Canadian. It was at that rate, it was changing 0.925 US per Canadian dollar. That was the rate of change. Okay, so here now R, we said it was 10,000 Canadian, and so but it said it was going by 0.925 US per Canadian dollar. Okay. So what does that tell us? Well, on September 8th, 2009, the US value of the revenue was, and again, it's positive, so it's increasing by 0.925 US per Canadian dollar. Okay. Now, what we want to do is we want to find du dx. Okay, so we're going to have to plug in x. Well, our x, they said, was 476. And so now, what does that tell us? Well, now this is saying, okay, remember, if we go back even to the last thing, we can go all the way to here. This is what we did. We found that on, we now are using not only dfdt and dtdx, we're using the dudx is over here, and so is dudr and drdx. And so what we're going to do is now we want to find the derivative. So we're going to take one derivative times the other one, and that should give us the overall derivative. And so when we do that, we can take, say, 0.925 US per, and it's going to be $1 Canadian times, and then it said we were getting 2.6 Canadian per units here, so that would be $2.6 Canadian per unit. And notice we have some cancellation. Our Canadian dollars cancel. So I guess I could cancel like that. And so now all we need to do is we need to take 0.925 times 2.6, and we get 2.405. And so that's going to be 2. What was it again? 2.405. And that was US per unit. Okay, because now we have US and it's a unit. And so we can say on September 2009, the revenue was increasing by 2.405 US per unit. Okay, and so now we know the increase per unit in US, and before, we knew what the increase was per unit for Canadian, and so now we've kind of got that whole conversion rate figured out there. Okay, so let's stop there and we'll come back for more.